Dr. Ian Griffin worked for NASA on the Hubble telescope project for a decade before returning to the UK to carry out research into the movement of asteroids. He now watches the night skies from his home observatory in Todmorden.
My view is that nearly every UFO that has ever been seen has some kind of explanation, and it's probably because people don't really understand what they're looking at that they just call it a UFO. The planet Venus is often mistaken for a UFO. This is because it's very bright and it's very close to the sun in the sky. So very often, if you don't know what you're looking at and you see this stonkingly bright light beaming towards you, you think, what on earth is that? Meteors are sometimes mistaken for UFOs as well, caused by a very fast-moving rock entering the Earth's atmosphere high up. As the rock moves through the atmosphere, it ionises it and causes the gas atoms to glow in different colours. The colours can be green, they can be blue, and sometimes they can even be an orangey-red colour.
Dr. David Clark has been researching official reports into UFO sightings for over 20 years.
When the Ministry of Defence files on UFOs from 1980 were opened, I went to the National Archives and immediately went looking for any mention of the sightings in Todmorden in 1980. And straight away I found a copy of the report by the police officers from Halifax, PC John Porter and his colleagues, who'd seen a bright blue ball of light in the sky. But there was absolutely no trace of the report that was made by Alan Godfrey the same night, about 30 minutes later. Maybe they just thought that his sighting was a bit too weird and a bit too disturbing, you know, to pass it on to the ministry.
But Alan Godfrey and John Porter were not the first police officers to have made an official report of a UFO sighting. Over the last 3 decades, police officers have contributed to a large proportion of British UFO reports. Gary Heseltine runs a database of UFO sightings made by both serving and retired police officers.
It's my belief that police officers' testimony is of a very high calibre. There is no reason to think that these officers are mistaken because of their training, and I believe that police officer testimony should be regarded very highly in the world of the way we treat UFOs.
After police officer Alan Godfrey reported an encounter with a strange object in West Yorkshire in 1980, some researchers claimed it to be a landmark in British UFO history.
After Alan Godfrey's experience had happened, we were immediately aware that this had cemented the importance of the Pennine area as the hotspot for UFO activity in Britain, and in fact probably the most active location for UFO encounters anywhere in Europe.
Whatever the source of the strange lights seen over Lancashire, PC Alan Godfrey's experience continued to fascinate the UFO community. After Alan Godfrey's sighting in Todmorden, he claimed to have lost some 30 minutes in time. The only physical evidence of his encounter, a damaged boot and a sketch he'd made at the time. In an attempt to find out more, UFO investigators suggested a radical idea.
They contacted me and asked me, would I be willing to go under hypnotic regression? I declined straight away. I wasn't sure, you know. I thought, what is hypnotic regression? The only hypnosis I'd ever seen was on television, on a stage, you know, where they make fun of you.
Eventually, Alan Godfrey was persuaded to undergo hypnosis, which was conducted by 2 psychiatrists, Dr. Jeffy and Professor Blair.
They wouldn't tell either of the psychiatrists what the subject matter was. They would only tell them that it was a policeman who they were going to try to regress to a certain time on a certain date to an incident that may or may not have happened.
Mike Sachs, whose interest in UFOs had been sparked by his own experiences the previous year, was present at the sessions.
The atmosphere in the room was absolutely electric as Alan is relating this series of events. All of a sudden, and under hypnosis, he goes and covers his eyes. Then somehow he's floating and he's taken into this room.
I have no recollection whatsoever what went on during that hypnotic regression.
Under hypnosis, Alan Godfrey's claims grew more bizarre. Not only had he witnessed a UFO, he had also come into contact with alien beings. In UFO terminology, he had been abducted.
We were actually present, possibly one of the first abduction cases that has happened in the UK.
Whatever Alan Godfrey had experienced in November 1980, and whatever had happened to the missing 30 minutes, the latest revelation seems scarcely credible.
UFO abductions, very big in America, not so big in Britain. A handful of people allegedly being abducted by UFOs. So when you get a policeman seeing a UFO, later coming out under hypnosis with the story he was abducted, you've got something that's quite solid there, and people have latched onto it as being, you know, a real event.
I'm asking myself, did that really happen? No, I can't. I don't believe it. But why am I saying it?
Psychologist Chris French has conducted several studies in the area of so-called paranormal experiences.
There are a number of different factors which seem to play a role in people reporting that they've had an alien abduction experience. Very often there is some initial triggering event, like, say, an episode of sleep paralysis or missing time, that leads people to believe they may have been abducted by aliens. What's probably happening is that they are getting confused between things that are happening in here and things that are happening in external reality. And basically, as a result, they're having sometimes hallucinatory experiences, sometimes false memories, but that's leading them to believe that they've had these alien encounters.
But it wasn't just Alan Godfrey's supposed abduction that intrigued ufologists. The investigators also discovered a connection to another unsolved local mystery, one they believed could have extraterrestrial origins. 6 months before his UFO sighting, Alan Godfrey and colleague Malcolm Agley had received a call about a body found at a local coal yard.
He received a radio message that found a body at Todmorden railway station, so I attended with PC Alan Godfrey.
So it instinctively tells you there's something not right. You know, you come across dead bodies all the time, it sounds like, but you do. He was lying on his back, just staring up into the sky.
There's no disturbance of the call, you know, to say how he got there. You just can't explain it at all.
And it was being treated as a crime scene. I think everybody at that stage thought it was a crime. That's how obvious it was. Why would a man climb a stack of coal, lie down on his back on top and die?
The body was that of a Polish emigre named Zygmunt Adamski, a former miner who'd moved to the UK after the Second World War and had settled in Wakefield, 20 miles from where he was found.
To me, I don't think he died there. I think he'd been put there. It looked to me as if he had anyway.
The evidence was inconclusive.
You'd expect if somebody had been lying on the belly or climbed up the coal, it'd be covered in coal dust. It'd been raining, it'd stick to him like glue. There was no visual coal on him, on the front of him, anywhere. And either on his face or anything. And he had these black marks that transpired to be burn marks round the back of the head. And there was one at the nape of the neck here, like an open wound, like a blistering wound, and it had had an ointment applied to it.
We just thought it was strange, you know, that he had these injuries and this sort of green ointment, which looks nothing I've seen before at all, you know. It just seemed strange and a bit unnatural, really.
Zygmunt Adamski had gone missing after a shopping trip. There was no suggestion that he'd planned to disappear, and he was known as a loving family man with no obvious enemies. The autopsy confirmed that Adamski had died of a heart attack. Coroner James Turnbull was mystified, not least by the strange substance found on Adamski's burns.
We had the substance analysed, and the toxicologists and the scientists couldn't come up with any answers to what it was. And we came up against a blank at every line of investigation. This was one of the most puzzling cases that I've come across in 25 years. If somebody proved to me that UFOs exist and that there was one around there at that time and that in some way we could associate it with this case, then perhaps I might say I'd only raise half an eyebrow.
Whatever the truth behind Adamski's death, which remains unsolved, Alan Godfrey's association with it was to turn him into a UFO celebrity.